and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm at Eden Camp. I've come to meet Frank, who's in charge of the restorations here at Eden Camp. He's going to be showing me around the Sherman Tank, and a bit about the history of it. So before I get into this video, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all the staff and the volunteers here at Eden Camp for what a wonderful job they're doing. Let's go take a look around.
Right, welcome to Eden Camp. My name's Frank and I'm going to take you through a little bit of a history of our M-50 Sherman. Okie dokie. So, when we start to restore a vehicle, the first thing we have to do before we even pick up a spanner and take anything to bits is we always have to get the history and the past of the vehicle so that we don't lose anything in the process of a restoration. And we always like to have it documented and every box ticked, really. So, obviously, that is not a standard Sherman. I'm sure everyone who's got a mild interest in tanks will be able to tell you there are some very, very big differences. And so we need to work from the very distant past all the way to the future. And that's what I'm going to do today, is I'm going to take you through and show you how we've worked out what we've worked out. So, I don't know if everyone's aware, but Sherman tanks and lots of other armour have something very similar to a VIN number that you'd find on a modern day car. They have a serial number, and that serial number on our tank is just round the back and it's just down here. Can you have a look? That number is 16565, and if you're lucky you can contact members of the restoration community that are brilliant and will gladly help you, and they'll be able to tell you that this was an M4A4 Sherman tank built in 1942 in November, and it was built by Chrysler. Okie dokie, it would have had the 20.5 litre Chrysler multi-bank engine in, fitted as standard. As you can see, that's not in there. And it would have had a 75mm medium velocity gun. All right. Using that serial number from down the bottom on that towing eye, you can then start to work out something called a HUD number. This is a guess. It is our best guess at what this number could or most likely will be. And it's 3016871. All right. And again, that confirms, second time, it's an M4A4, built in November 1942 by Chrysler. So that's another box ticked. We think that our tank was kept over in America for at least a year of its life for training. We can't prove it, that's just what we suspect, because under the Lend-Lease agreement, we think the M4A4 in batches was shipped to British forces for use in Europe. Unfortunately for me, when the Brits got hold of them under the Lend-Lease agreement, they scrubbed this number off. All right, and they put something, basically the British version of this, called a T number. Yeah, and I've not found that T number, nor will I don't think. I can't see it anywhere inside. We're still looking. Unfortunately also, there is no correlation between a T number, the HUD number, or the serial number. All right, and so basically, World War II history as far as this tank specifically is concerned, unfortunately has been lost. And so we now need to start and move forward to the next phase of her life and start to look at what happened post-war. Now, if we just come to the front, just quickly, there is a few little bits that are different. The first and most obvious one is that when Mother was built in 1942, she would have had the 3-part diff casing, the gearbox casings. They basically would have had 2 big bolted ribs, and they're in a 3-part construction. And as you can see, ours isn't. It's a single piece. Okay, and that was actually an upgrade. Now, that's one clue. This is also a clue, we believe, that these weld marks here actually correspond to a horn plate. And we think that horn plate was added by the French. We think this upgrade was added by the French. Okay, and if you have a look through the Sherman Munition site, you can actually see that there was a program called the M4A4T program. And the M4A4T was an upgrade of Sherman tanks post-war by the French forces. And the T stands for transformer. Basically, they were upgrading them with bits left over. The upgraded transmission, a horn, there you go, it's French. But also, the 20.5 litre multi-bank Chrysler engine that is an absolute work of engineering art, the French didn't get along with at all. Do you know about the French, about the multi-bank? So the multi-bank is basically 5 6-cylinder engines around one shaft. So you've got it's in a star formation, 2 there, 1 there, yep. You can imagine the maintenance that would require and the downtime. And when you're talking about tanks, downtime and maintenance is a problem because they can't be out doing tanky stuff. And so the French actually removed the Chrysler multi-bank and put in, again, another upgrade, the Continental radial engine. Now, how do we know that that happened? This scar here actually relates to that engine. I'll just do the action so you can see. All right. Basically, when you start an aircraft engine or a radial engine, you need to bring the oil from the bottom of the engine all the way to the top. And that's to stop something called hydrostatic lock. People say it's like priming the engine. It's not quite right, but it's basically enough. You basically have to widen it 40 odd times. You see them do it with propellers, don't you? And that's what this hole's for, is it's a crank hole, like that. All right. So, we don't have the radial engine, as you can see. And we don't have the siren, but we do have the tranny. When most of the tanks that were in the M4A4T program, they were given a stamp. So just like we did with our British T number, the French also added a number and they stamped it. And it is known as the serial number in a box. Now, I haven't found it yet, if it's still here. And the fact it's missing actually is the important bit. The fact that that weld hole for the crank hole is filled in is the important bit, okay? So we're starting to see that obviously that wasn't the end of Mother's life. So that is the 50s that was happening, late 40s, 50s. So now we return to where we started, and we have to have a look at the tank overall again. So it's definitely not an M4A4. It's definitely not an M4A4T. All right, so we now need to have a look. And actually, the dating starts to suggest what's happened. It's general knowledge in actual facts, but again, we like to try and say, this is why we think this happened. We use the gun as our dating point at that point. So, as you can see, our gun, so a standard gun would have ended here. All right, you see, ours is a little bit bigger. Yep. All right. And that is a CN 7550 gun. It was built in Bourges in France in 1956. Okay. Now, it's actually a high velocity gun. It was used mainly and widely on AMX 13s, which is a light French tank. And the French were upgrading them. Okay. Now, if you have a look inside the gun, I think I said there's a date stamp of 1956. If you type in France, CN 7550, and start to look through the internet, you very quickly realise that France and Israel had secured an arms deal. They were in agreement to provide M4A4s, yeah, and basically the Israelis didn't like the standard gun, and so they also agreed a deal to buy the upgraded gun. The French were the ones that married the gun to the tank, to the hull, sorry, first of all. And then the Israelis basically took it over because they were able to do it. There's some very, very big modifications. We think ours was actually performed in Israel. We found a dating stamp on the inside of our engine deck that states where it was done and what year. We think it was done in 1971. There is some very big alterations to the turret. Obviously, if you had an extra heavy gun with extra length, you can see that that turret's going to be out of balance, you know, fairly rapidly. Well, can you see my Israeli welding? Okay, they've added a big counterweight on the back to balance the turret out. Yeah, you see that? Can you see that as a block? Yeah. All right. So now we've not taken this off, so it's a guess again. Standard, we think that turret was probably 5 tons. We now think there's probably another ton in it, maybe even a ton and a half. So it's probably nearer 7 tons when it's ready. They've realised again that the 16-inch VVSS, which is vertical volute sprung suspension, on a 16-inch track, which is quite narrow in actual fact, really wasn't up to the task. And so what the Israelis did was again refer to World War II and put something called HVSS onto our tank. So this is another upgrade performed by Israel. This is actually a volute spring. So when I say HVVS or VVVS, this is the spring I'm referring to, the volute spring. All right. When Mother was standard, this spring would have been sighted vertically this way up, all right, in a dolly like that. And it would have been just this single road wheel on a single. So the track would have been only, I don't know, let's say that 16-inch. Yeah. As you can see, ours is 1.5 track. It's a lot bigger. And they basically, the way they did that was they could turn these springs horizontally, yeah, and then added another set down the back. We know that this was done afterwards because if you have a look down the back again, can you see they've had to gas axe and cut so that they can access these road wheels, yeah, and that is on every one, see, all the way along. Okay, so when Mother gets her gun and the upgraded turret and the upgraded suspension, she becomes an M-50. And that is known as an M-50 Mark I because she's still got the petrol radial in. I don't think Mother ever kept and ran her petrol radial because she was one of the later ones, we think, that was upgraded by the Israelis and the IDF. And so they become a Mark II because the radial engine that the French put in was no longer up to pushing that extra weight and that extra set of tracks basically around. And so they put a 15.5 litre Cummins VT8 460 in. That's the engine that was in Mother when we took it out to repair. All right, and that would have sat, it looked really small in there, but it's quite a big block, I have to say. It's a big V8. And that's what was in Mother. Now, as I said at the start, we always like to kind of prove this. So I'm going to show you exactly how we did kind of prove all of this. If you just come this way, this is going to be fairly difficult with your camera. So just like we looked at the scars at the front with the horn, etc. Can you see there's a scar here? And it runs from here all the way along. Yep. Okay, so just like the Americans had a HUD number, the Brits had a T number, the French put the serial number in a box, the IDF also put their own number on. More worryingly, the IDF decided to weld their numbers on because when tanks burned, they were realising they were losing number plates and weren't able to identify the tanks, and so they decided to weld it straight onto the hull. You're going to have to come for a real good close-up. I'm going to read you the IDF number plate, okay? It's 813 6 1 2, and that is Hebrew for army. Okay, and the reason they denote sector on the number plate is because everything in Israel is sand coloured. They don't have RAF blue or army green. It's all that kind of colour, all sandy. And so at that point we were happy. We'd gone from 1942 up to nearly present day. We'd kind of gone round it, tried to prove it and listen to it and let the tank tell us the story. Again, we then cross-checked that with general knowledge basically from the internet, and also other people came to assist us and did their own read, and basically we ended up with this story through work through a lot of folks. And so we started to work. So as I said, we don't pick up a spanner until we've done that, and now we felt we were happy enough. So the first thing we did was take the engine deck off. Now, it was filthy, and I mean dirty. It was absolute. I think there might even be a bit left. It was full of that. All right, sand, mud, and general but to me, it was a treasure trove. Basically, because it was so full of sand, you almost had layers of activity, layers of different times, and basically we were able to start scratching the dirt away, a bit like archaeologists, I suppose. We found loads and loads of dating evidence. We've got that to show you over there. Okay, so starting from the right-hand side, in amongst all the muck and actually under a starting panel internally, because the inside of the tank was also in the same condition, not just the engine bay. This was our first kind of early find. These are actually Canadian-made 30 cal loading belts. There is a date stamp of 1943 there, which is a bit easier to see on some of the other ones. We actually found 3 of these. And they've, as far as I can see, they've never been used. I think some people have told me they could have been used for cleaning by the IDF. Again, we don't know. Sometimes you have to tell the story and just have a little bit of a leap of faith and enjoy the fact that that was definitely made in 1943 and you're holding it, because really it's a treasure, you know. Again, it ties in with the dates that we've suggested for Mother, which is 1942, shipped over 1943, Canadian, shipped over to Lend-Lease to take part in Europe, and it moved on. We also found absolutely boatloads of spent brass, all right? So every time a gun is fired, the projectile, the bullet, is sent forwards at a great rate of knots, and the brass cartridge, brass casing even, is ejected down. Mother would have been armed with a 30 cal, or probably more likely, certainly for these casings, 7.62 by 51, which is NATO spec for 30 cal, and also the 50 cal on the top there. Can you see the pintle mount just sticking right out the centre of the turret? And that's what these would have been fired from, was that big, big machine gun. Every bullet, or every casing, is stamped by its maker, and it's also stamped with a date. Again, the internet's a great resource, but luckily I'm quite into my head stamps, so I'll just explain that this is the maker's mark, this TZ. It's a very difficult Arabic word to pronounce, but I definitely aren't going to attempt. And this is the dating stamp, okay? So this is the fact the armoury it came from in 1986, all right? Again, they're all the same. Just like that, you see? So lots of different types of rounds. Again, we were finding the smaller ones, 1982s and onwards. And it was fine, really. We were finding the IDF uniform. This was actually next to the dipstick in the engine. It was being used as an oil rag. This actually denotes IDF, and where it's black, in actual fact, would have been bright yellow cotton. It would have been bright yellow thread, so it really would have stood out when it was new. But as you can see, some of the more observant of you will have realised I said 1980 something. Now, in actual fact, the IDF stopped using these probably mid-70s, I would think. I've not found any evidence or any kind of evidence to say that they were out and about. I suppose they could have been. Again, the research is ongoing, so if anyone knows, come and tell me. But as far as I was aware, kind of 1979, these were stopped. I thought they'd been sold over to England in the 80s. So finding Arabic rounds from 86, 87, all the way through till 1988, basically threw me right off kilter. As I said, I like to try and tick every box and try and make sure we know the history before we start, and that was a piece of history that was definitely in that tank that I couldn't explain. So we're going to have a walk around to the back yet again, and it's only via and only through the help that I've received, actually mostly from an author called Sam Assad, I should say. He writes something called the Blue Steel books, A blue steel are basically tank enthusiast books, and they're very, very centred on the Lebanese conflict. Now, I remember when Mother was at Eden Camp before she was painted, I think probably for the first time. She had red lead on, yeah, which is like a primer. And she also had grey primer on. I think there might be a little bit of grey primer left. This sort of colour here. Yeah. No. So in actual fact, if you look to see if you can explain why a Sherman might be blue, you'll see that there was a force created during the Lebanese conflict called the SLA, and the SLA is a southern Lebanese army, and they were basically allied with the IDF. And of course, the IDF had these laying about. Like I said before, they were probably not using them. I can't prove that, that's just what I think. And so 36 M-50 Mark IIs were gifted to the SLA under the Allied agreement by the IDF. And they also, just like everybody else, wanted to put their mark on it. So just like the Americans had the HUD, we had the T number, the French have a serial number in the box, the IDF had this number here, the SLA have a number here. Now, come closer again. Remember when I first started talking about this, I explained to you it was important to notice what we didn't have, just as much as it was to notice what we did have, i.e. this was filled in, there was stuff missing, or bits added on, all right, and other stuff missing, like the serial number in the box is gone, etc. Well, this was a really hard scar to read. It actually took me quite a long time to get hold of it, and I've actually got quite a good photograph of it in a higher contrast, where it's very, very clear. Now, it's important to realise that this, we think it's 219, these numbers here, are the last registration plate or number of our tank. Can you see that these are very, very visible? Still lumpy, in fact, because they're applied, they're applique, see? Yeah. And this is really, 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 really smooth. Well, I'll be the SLA guy, all right? Oh, I don't want that number showing. Angle grinder. Ground that off, all right, and put my number on. And that is why that is so difficult to read, because that they've added on again, and it's a different phase. So they've got rid of the IDF to turn it into SLA. That is where Mother's history is done and is confirmed. So she was basically 1942 all the way through till at least 88. That is the last kind of date we've found for her. We don't quite know. So the question really is how the heck has it ended up at Eden Camp in Malton in North Yorkshire, all the way over from the Middle East? There was a very large military collection called the Budge Collection down in Lincolnshire, and he was a very big buyer of old military vehicles that had been used, etc. I think it was probably the largest collection in the world at one point. And he bought, we think, 9 or 10 of the M50s from Israel and brought them back home. And that's where the museum got hold of it. We've got a photo of our tank at the Budge Collection. Again, it's bright blue. It's not in grey primer, it's SLA blue. And our tank was labelled DB5. I've seen photos all the way up to DB9, which is why I think he probably had 9 or 10 probably. And that's where we bought her. Mother lived for possibly 18 years, just under our V of poppies. Yep, that's exactly where Mother used to live. And in February of this year, we decided to start our restoration of her and start performing the history and the repair, basically. And so we towed her up. Ever wanted to know what 36 tons of Sherman tank will do to tarmac? Only this. Which is really nothing. All right. She rolled really easily. She still steered, in fact. It was astoundingly free, and we were very lucky. And so up she came. We've started our restoration. We've taken the VT8460 out. We've suffered some frost damage. We don't know if that happened here or anywhere. It could have been at Budge, it could have been, I suppose, the Middle East, it could have been who knows what. It could be the reason the tank was stopped being used by the SLA, for all I know. And so we've taken that engine out and we're now in the process of repairing and refreshing and renewing. Everything else we're now going to start work on. Lots of you will notice that I said we started in February, and in actual fact it's now kind of nearly November. In fact it is November, not nearly November, it is November. And the reason we've not progressed as far as we have is A, because we are performing the history, which is the talk I've just gone through with you. And second of all, during the summer months, we try to make Eden Camp as interactive and as informative for our visitors as possible. We realised that Mother had a great long story. We specialise in World War II, but we also make people aware that after World War II, things didn't just stop. We've still got troops, even to this day, overseas. And so we like to tell the story, if we can, from past to present, to make sure people realise what's happening. And so we decided for the summer holidays, we would try our best to get as many people as interested in Mother as we could do and tell her story, basically. And so that's why, now in November, when there's not so many customers here, we've not got so many visitors, we've decided to start and really get our teeth into it now. So watch your space, and hopefully next year I might be able to drive and come and see you in it. We'll see what happens.
So let's have a quick look around the Sherman. Bigger than you think. There's the engine bay. The engine's been taken out for restoration. So here's the main hatch that you get inside the tank. As you can see, a round's gone through there. It's only thin metal is this piece. So I think it might have just grazed it, maybe gone inside. The way that it's looking, it looks like it did go in. Also a bit of damage there. The round could have possibly gone through there and then hit the little periscope cover there. So yeah, let's go down and take a look inside. So here we are inside the Sherman. It's very cramped. Not much room at all. I wouldn't like to be stuck in here. Yeah, so very small indeed. Looking forward to coming back when it's all restored and seeing the job that they've done. So this is the driver's hatch where you would get in. There's the controls down there. I won't be able to fit in them, too big. The hatches are extremely small. There's the inside view. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Frank for giving me the tour around the tank, letting me climb on it, have a look inside. And also I'd like to thank the staff for what a wonderful job they're doing here at Eden Camp. If you're in the area or you're into military history, please do stop by and check them out. I'll put a link down in the description to their website page. And yeah, the whole museum, it's a great place to come and have a look around if you're interested in the prisoner of wars and the military history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.